Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. Tommy Orange's Wandering Stars is probably one of the most anticipated releases this year, and it looks like it's living up to the hype. A quick scan of the reviews and you see words like powerful and lyrical and triumphant. The book is both a prequel and a sequel of sorts to his debut novel, There. So, before we hear about his new book, we're going to take a quick trip back in time to his first big profile on NPR back in 2018. He talked to NPR's Lynn Neary, and I actually remember working on this piece as a producer, and I remember being struck by how Orange wasn't super comfortable being book famous, but it was a bargain he was down to make in order to get attention to Native stories. That's after the break.
This message comes from Apple Card. Earn up to 3% daily cash back on every purchase, every day. Then grow it at 4.50% annual percentage yield when you open a savings account with Apple Card. Visit apple.co/card calculator to see how much you can earn. Apple Card is subject to credit approval. Savings available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
Tommy Orange grew up in Oakland. His mother is white, his father a member of the Cheyenne tribe. He wasn't much of a reader as a kid, but after graduating from college with a degree in sound engineering, he couldn't find work. So he got a job at a bookstore where he developed a passion for reading.
I was in my 20s and also searching for meaning, and I wasn't a reader, so fiction was a super novel thing for me, and the novel itself was, and I just fell in love with it.
The leap to writing seemed like a natural progression to Orange, and with the publication of his first novel, he took another leap, from the solitary world of reading and writing to center stage at Book Expo.
They're going to introduce Tommy. He'll go up to the podium, read for a minute, take a couple questions, and then go back down there.
Orange, who's not at all used to being the center of attention, was making the rounds with his publicist, from a main stage reading to signing his novel for independent booksellers from around the country.
Good morning. It's so nice to meet you.
You too.
My name is Joshua.
Making an impression on booksellers is crucial to a young writer, and based on the feedback Orange was getting at this event, There has very much caught the attention of the book-selling community. Hannah Oliver Depp is with Word Bookstores in Brooklyn and Jersey City.
It is what we're calling our Word Reads, which means the entire Word Bookstore staff is recommending this book.
The whole staff?
The entire staff.
Everybody's read it?
Yeah, so the majority of our staff have read it or are actively reading it right now.
Yeah.
And it is what people are talking about. We pick a book a season to focus on, and this has very easily been voted as the one they want to promote.
There is a work of fiction, but it begins with a nonfiction essay. It shatters the myth of the stoic native that's been portrayed over the years by the iconic image of the Indian head, which was once ubiquitous on nickels and on late-night TV. Orange replaces that benign image with brutal examples from history of violence against Indians.
For Native writers, there's a kind of burden to set the record straight because it's been told wrong so long. So I was trying to find a way to do it in an interesting way, and I started finding all these connections around the Indian head and all these different ways that the Indian head has played out throughout history.
Orange has drawn a lot of attention for being in the vanguard of a new generation of Native American writers. And in focusing his work on urban Indians, he's taken on a subject that has gotten scant attention in literature.
Native people look like a lot of different things, and we're in cities now. 70% of Native people live in cities now, and we just need a new story to build from, and I just wanted to try to do that.
Orange says his father had a traditional Native upbringing in Oklahoma, but he didn't have a lot of time to introduce his children to Native American culture. Orange says that's a common experience for kids like him who grow up in a big city.
Growing up on a reservation, you have a land base and you have a community of people, and I think it's easier to come to a solid identity in a situation like that than just being in the sprawl of buildings and all different kinds of people. You might need to seek it out more actively if you're growing up in the city.
Orange introduces a wide cast of characters in There, all Native American, but with varying degrees of connection to the culture. One, a young boy named Orvil Redfeather, becomes curious about his heritage and begins seeking information on the internet and watching videos on YouTube and TV. In this excerpt from the novel, Orvil discovers the art of Native American dancers.
There on the screen, in full regalia, the dancer moved like gravity meant something different for him. It was like breakdancing in a way, Orvil thought. But both new, even cool, and ancient seeming. There was so much he'd missed, hadn't been given, hadn't been told. In that moment, in front of the TV, he knew he was part of something you could dance to.
Orvil hears that a powwow's coming to town and decides he wants to be part of it. The powwow becomes the centerpiece of the story, with all the characters eventually heading toward it. Orange says he always planned to structure the book around a powwow.
It feels contemporary and traditional. It's intertribal. It's a marketplace where you sell art. You have dancing and singing and a big drum, and there's a loudness and a visibility. And so I think people who go to powwows, Native or non-Native, can really feel the spirit of Native people, or one aspect of it anyway. And it just fits really well within what the urban Native community can be.
Each character in the book is drawn to the powwow for different reasons. A struggling alcoholic finds some peace in drumming. A young woman has escaped an abusive marriage. Some would-be thieves plan a robbery that goes terribly wrong. Each has a backstory, and the ties that bind the characters gradually become clear. Orange says he wanted to create a large cast of characters to offset the stereotypes of Native people.
There's a dehumanization that's happened with Native people because of all these misperceptions about what we are. And it's convenient to think of us as gone or drunks or dumb. It's convenient to not have to think about a brutal history and people surviving and still being alive and well today, thriving in various different forms of life, good and bad. I wanted to represent a range of human experience as a way to humanize Native people.
It's exciting.
Back at his signing, booksellers were lining up to chat with Orange.
I'm Abby. It's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I love the book.
Debbie Fenewald of Book People in Austin, Texas, says There is a surprising book.
It brings together all of these various characters that I just felt so involved with. But then the ending is just this crazy, powerful moment. And then I was just left in shock at the end.
As the signing goes on, Orange seems to grow more comfortable in the role of popular author. It's not his natural habitat, but he knows these days an author has to make an effort to sell his books. And he knows that if his book does well, it will help other Native American writers get deals in the future.
There's tons of authors that are just emerging at the same time as me, and I think it's a really exciting time. And I just want to help keep the momentum going and help usher in more voices.
When the publicity blitz is over, Orange says, he looks forward to getting back to writing and teaching, mentoring would-be authors who hope to be in his position one day. Lynn, Neary, NPR News.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from South Carolina Federal Credit Union. Folks listening to this in a vehicle they're tired of owning are in luck. South Carolina Federal provides auto loans that could help reduce the costs of commutes and road trips. And there's no payment due for 90 days after closing. To learn more about how fast, friendly financing can get drivers behind the wheel and out on the road, visit scfederal.org. Loans subject to approval. Certain restrictions apply.
All right, now that we've gotten to know the guy a bit, Tommy Orange recently spoke with NPR's Scott Simon about his new book, Wandering Stars. And there's a bit in this conversation where he addresses the pressures of following up a big hit debut novel, and he says something about how sequels are kind of doomed from the start, but he felt compelled to write one anyway.
Tommy Orange's new novel begins with a young man who lives through an annihilation. The Sand Creek Massacre of 1864, where U.S. Army troops savagely, to invoke a word they often use to describe the human beings they slaughtered, murdered about 230 Cheyenne and Arapaho people. Jude Starr is later sent to the Fort Marion prison castle in Florida, where his jailer is a devout Christian named Richard Henry Pratt, who believed Native Americans had to be forcibly shorn of their language, culture, and history. He's remembered for this especially noxious quote, "Kill the Indian in him and save the man." The journey of Jude Starr and his descendants is the story of Wandering Stars, the second novel from Tommy Orange, his first, There was a Pulitzer finalist. Tommy Orange joins us now from Oakland. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
This novel is so beautifully written and so hard to read. Why did you devote 6 years of your life to writing it?
This piece of history was not something known to me. This, as far as this historical part, I initially set out to write a more straightforward sequel, and I stumbled across this piece of history while I was in Sweden for the Swedish translation of There. I was at a museum, and I saw a newspaper clipping that said Southern Cheyennes in St. Augustine, Florida. And I didn't know why we would ever be in Florida, and fell down this rabbit hole of information. And I didn't know how it would connect to There necessarily. It was just a piece of history that I became fascinated with. And I was doing some research in one of the books I was reading. There was a list of the prisoners. And one of the characters' names was Star, at the actual prisoner. And another one was Bear Shield. And that's one of the families from There, one of the core families. And I realized I was going to try to write this family line.
And we should explain, you're a member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes and are also biracial.
Correct.
I wonder if seeing the story, hearing of it, put an expectation, and the success of your first novel, to be sure, all put an expectation on you.
Yeah, there was the sophomore effort is sort of doomed, and why I would take on a sequel when that's already tough to get past the sophomore effort. Sequels are also sort of doomed to not be as good as the first, but this is just what compelled me to write. And if you're going to be sitting with your work for long periods of time, you have to be pretty convinced about it, and I felt convinced.
I want to ask you to read a section, if I can, about an episode Star goes through. I'll just have you read it and introduce the story of a life mask.
Before we were released from the prison castle, a man came to measure our heads, to make masks of us, molds of our heads with white liquid. He called them life masks. The man wanted to compare Indian heads with white heads. He thought if Indian heads were smaller, that could explain why we were savages. I froze as the thick liquid poured over and enveloped me. It was cold and then warm and tight against my face. It got quiet and then it cracked. There were tubes stuck into my nose so I could breathe. I wondered if it was death the man meant by life masks. I thought maybe I was being turned into a thing for them to keep. But a head was a living thing. A face moved and changed all the time. And then I couldn't move mine anymore at all, so I thought, this must be some kind of death, some kind of keeping.
The novel moves ahead through generations and then to Oakland in 2018 following a shooting at a powwow, which is in your previous novel, There. A young man named Orvil, who's a member of the Bear Shield Red Feather family, has been shot. What brings these events together as you construct it?
Well, Orvil's story, in a way, echoes his ancestor, Jude Starr. It's a young man running away from a massacre and essentially trying to recover from what that means, and sort of a harrowing thing that he has to go through. To be shot while dancing in full regalia, it's a lot for him to handle.
And addictions run through these generations too, don't they?
They do. There's alcohol, laudanum, and then in the midst of this opioid crisis, Orvil gets addicted to painkillers.
I want to ask you about your book's dedication. For everyone surviving and not surviving this thing called and not called addiction. First, may I ask, are you thinking of people you know?
Yeah. My life has been shaped and mangled by addiction. I've had my own struggles, and everybody in my family has. So it's just been a big part of my life, and my heart goes out to people that suffer from this thing, because it's tough, and this whole country is facing it right now.
How did you begin writing? I mean, I've read you were working at a bookstore.
Yeah, I was moving the entire fiction section from the back of the store more toward the front. It was a bookstore like they don't exist anymore, huge and dusty, and didn't get very many customers. because we didn't get very many customers, I could just read for the first time. I'd never, I skimmed through novels in high school to pass tests, but I never really understood what fiction could do. And so, soon after I became a reader, I decided I wanted to try writing, and spent many years just doing that privately while I worked. Just all my free time putting it toward reading and writing as much as I could, because I felt like I needed to catch up.
I'm struck by a line that Orville's brother utters, speaking of Cheyenne and Arapaho. Everyone only thinks we're from the past, but then we're here. But they don't know we're still here. What's that feel like?
It's an exciting time right now for representation. Most people in this country don't understand what it's like to never be seen, to never be represented in popular culture. Or if you are, it's a misrepresentation. Our educational institutions almost exclusively teach the Indian, the Native person as it relates to pilgrims, 1 month out of the year, or maybe just 1 week. So I think it's a really exciting time, but it has felt lonely, and it's a big part of American history. And for that to be omitted all this time, it does something to you. I'm not sure if I could spell it out entirely. It's part of why I write novels, because I can think and process quite a bit on the page.
Tommy Orange, his novel Wandering Stars. Thanks so much for speaking with us.
Thank you, Scott.
That's it for this week on NPR's Book of the Day. Let us know what you think. You can write to us at bookoftheday@npr.org. I'm Andrew Limbong. The podcast is produced by Isabella Gomez Sarmiento and edited by Megan Sullivan. Our founding editor is Petra Mayer. The show elements for this week were produced and edited by William Troop, Connor Donovan, Erica Ryan, Andrew Craig, Matthew Sherman, Shirley Jahad, Todd Munt, Rena Advani, Jacob Conrad, Lindsay Toddy, Ed McNulty, and Samantha Balaban. Beth Donovan is our managing editor. Thanks for listening.
It's Oscar season, and we watched the nominated movies so you don't have to. We are making some bold predictions for Hollywood's biggest night, and we may just help you win your Oscars pool. Listen to NPR's Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from South Carolina Federal Credit Union. Owning a home is still possible if you ask the right people, like the home loan advisors at South Carolina Federal Credit Union. You could be closer to owning a home than you think with options like no money down and adjustable rate mortgages. Rely on South Carolina Federal for guidance through every step of the home loan process. Learn more at scfederal.org/home loans. Qualifications and restrictions apply. Equal housing lender.